Okay, good day everyone. Stood like this, and let's see if you can actually hear me. Well, I see you can hear me. Let's hear if you can hear me. Perfect, you should be able to hear me. At least I hear myself on YouTube, and that is always something. Apologies for the delay. It's basically sponsored by Microsoft because yes, so Przemek was asking me a couple of times on my streams about, hey, did you update to 1803, you know, when you asked Windows update, Windows 10 update. And I finally did, and I think I spent like around 2 hours fixing the system and making it runnable. And obviously parts of the problems, like the last 10 minutes was basically just before the stream. So I guess yeah, the horror story here goes like this, that after installing the update, I got a blue screen, and then it got worse. Well, not really. Then the system actually booted, and I had to like reinstall my RAM disk, which shuffled the drive letters around, and that led to some problems. Open broadcast software obviously didn't see any microphones, and I had to rebind them. Thankfully, that's pretty easy, and I already was expecting that. My keyboard lost all its bindings, including the bindings I used for zooming stuff, which is weird. I had to log into my mouse driver, which is pretty weird, like a pretty weird thing to say, right? Log into a mouse driver. This is not something you would expect one to say, but yes, I did have to log into my mouse driver to get all the bindings on it. And also, one of the applications I'm using is complaining that Windows took over one of the shortcuts, and there are also like some other things, like my console stopped working because it expected to be on one drive, but due to the drive reshuffling, it actually ended up on another drive, blah, blah, blah. In the end, I spent around 2 hours fixing my system, so yeah, but it works. It seems it works, so I guess we can get it going. Today's moderator is surprisingly Foxtrot Charlie, not KrzaQ, it's Foxtrot Charlie. You can see his nickname here. If you have any questions at any time, do write to Foxtrot Charlie. I don't think the Q command will work today because we have some other problems as well, you know, technical problems like to pair up, right? So be sure to write to Foxtrot Charlie either on YouTube chat on our IRC, so he can pass me the questions. Yes, there is microphone in the picture. Yeah, it is here. That doesn't matter too much. There is nothing in this area which I'm going to present anyway, and it's a little closer, so I guess that's always better. The topic of today's live stream is going to be deserializing and deserialization, and how can that be problematic from a security point of view. There is basically a bug class related to that, which I guess some refer to as object injection. And it's actually a bug class which is really dependent on the technology which is underlying, which deserialization are you using, which protocol are you using. And not all serialization protocols have this bug. But yeah, so this is basically what we'll be discussing today. Apart from that, let me quickly think if I have any other news. I'm pretty sure I have at least 2 links to share with you folks. So let's move to the desktop. Here we go. Oh, it's even the correct desktop. That's the best news, basically. Okay, let's see. So first and foremost, there is a new variant of the Spectre attack, you know, Spectre meltdown. I'm going to give you a link to Schneider on security, because Bruce actually has already aggregated all the links. So let's just go there. Yeah, the exclamation Q doesn't work today because our backend for questions kinda is offline due to reasons. Yes. Anyway, so yeah, so this happened. Variant 4 happened, which is said to be really interesting. So do take a look. Apart from that, I do have another link. Oh yeah, this is a funny one. Well, okay, this one was funny as well. So This one is going to be to /dot, where I read about it, and it's just another backdoor account found in routers. It seems to be happening quite frequently, and yeah, that's I'm not too happy about it. Like I guess they should learn, right? Whoever is creating the routers, the firmware for the routers should know that do not put service accounts, because if you hard code the service account, somebody is going to crack the password sooner or later, and yeah, and that's it, right? It's a backdoor, and like anyone can access anyone's router, so I'm pretty sure that is not how it's supposed to work. Cool. So about the Deserialization, let me just open some links. I guess I'm going to cover the basics, and I will mostly focus on Python today and on PHP. I will, I guess, mention Java, but only briefly probably. So yeah, and I guess at the end I'm going to give you a set of links to basically other materials where you can read about it. One thing to mention is that in the description of the video you can actually find a link to a short test, because we are experimenting with random Livestream related features, and one of them is doing short tests before the stream, or doing the stream or whatever. It's just for you to basically check your knowledge about last week's topic, or like random topics. And this time is like 5 easy questions about zip, and you can basically check your score once you complete the form. There's no signing in or anything like that needed. Apart from that, there's a mission actually today, which is, I guess, a good thing. So yeah, there's that. It's going to be an easy mission though, and like just one step, nothing fancy like last week. Perfect. Let me see if there are any questions. There are. Yeah, there's a question. Why is 1803 causing this much trouble? What may be the case in your opinion? It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it should have been well tested, right? But the problem with, like, for example, OBS unbinding the microphones has been after every large update so far. So, yeah. It's a good question. Next question is, most of the paper's write-ups cover PHP or Java deserialization. Is it possible to cover .NET deserialization during this stream? No, it's not possible, because I have no idea about .NET and about C#. It's basically a technology which I touched really rarely, and I have no idea about it, so no, not today. Okay, let's get going then with serialization and deserialization. I'm going to include some basics, and I mean like basics. So if you know what deserialization is, you can basically go make yourself a cup of tea and come back in half an hour or maybe 15 minutes. Let me just find my directory. Okay, here we go. So, okay. We don't need this. So basically it's like this. The problem is we have some data, right, in a structure, and the question is how to write this data on a disk and how to then load the data. And this is a problem from some perspectives. For example, in the C language, it's a rather hard problem, and I'm going to show you quickly why. So I'll create a C program with a structure, right? Okay, so this will be a structure for our data, and it will contain like 2 fields. Yeah. Now, to correctly write the structure to disk, you would have to do like this. First, you need to open a file, obviously, and this is like normal for a step which you always have to do. Bin, I guess, for writing binary. I'm assuming that the file was opened actually correctly, and now you have to first write the first field, which is b, and it's 4 bytes. Yeah, and then the second field. Sorry, I need to actually create an instance of a structure, so let's call it S, and I'm going to initialize it with 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say letter A. Okay, now this is like this, and this is like this is 1 byte, and then I close it at the end. So this is, I would say, a correct way to do it. Now, correct-ish. Okay, compiled, something was created, and we have a file which is 5 bytes. And yeah, it looks like this. This is basically the first field, and this is the second field. And if we look actually, if we look actually here, we can see the decoded value of the first field, that it is correct. And if we look here, we see that yeah, this is the same letter which we have written to. Now, if there would be multiple fields, right, like more fields, then I would have to write more f-writes. And technically, after each f-write, you should actually check whether the write was successful. Here, you would have to actually add the error checking as well. And I guess this is a little, starts being tedious. And additionally, if you'd have a pointer to something, let's assume like we have, I don't know, this is a linked list, right? For example. And so if I do like next with a pointer, then things start to be funny, because per structure, then you have to basically write a function which will understand that, hey, this is a linked list. This is like a structure, an instance of a structure which has this next field, which points to another instance of a structure, and this can point to yet another instance of the structure, like another node, right? And the last one will point to just basically null. And I cannot write, you know, type f-write and write next, because next is a pointer, it's an address in memory. It makes sense only in this instance of a running process. There might be some exceptions from that, but usually that's how you deal with pointers. So you cannot really write a pointer, you have to figure out how to really write it. You would have to probably, in this case, create a function which is able to write this type of data, and then call it recursively for each element, or maybe call it in a loop to walk through each of the node until it reaches a null pointer at the end in the next field, right? Additionally, with reading, you would have to do the same thing, so you start having quite a lot of code. Now, I'll add that one more thing, which is, I guess you might want to, instead of writing f-write for every field, you might want to do f-write as one, and then size of the data struct, which is, struct. But this actually will create a file, which is 8 bytes, because there is some memory in between these two fields, because so I think in this case it would work. If there would be another int here, then what I am trying to describe would be here. So if there would be another int here, int a, let's say it, then between this and the next int, there would be 3 bytes of padding, because int needs to be aligned at the boundary of 4. And yeah, and it wouldn't be if it would be placed immediately after that. So that means that there are 3 bytes of padding there which are contain basically uninitialized data. So if you write it like this to file, you have a potential of leaking something important, right? Depending on what is in memory in that case. So yeah, that's why you basically shouldn't use this method. This is, yeah, it's commonly used, but you shouldn't, right? You should basically break down to this. So what I'm going after here is that the more complex the structure or the data structure is, then the more code you have to write to actually put it into a file, into like a sleep mode, where, you know, all the data is basically frozen, put into a file, and then you can get it from the file and again create like living data structures from it. So, and this is also something which is really common, which you do really common. Given this, some smart people decided, hey, why don't we just like make a generic method for creating like basically serializing, taking the data structure and serializing it, or marshalling it. Marshalling is another name for it. It into a file, and then let's create a method which actually grabs the data from the file and creates, the set of structures for this. In C, I don't think there's a good way to do it, though there is something called Google protocol buffers, Google protobuf, which is actually a really cool way of serializing data, which is pretty portable between languages, and at the same time, it's not really loose. You have to define basically the data structure. Sorry. So, yeah, but I'm not going to talk about protobuf today because it's actually fine. I will mention JSON as an example of serialization. So JSON is fine as well. Like if you don't do anything strange, JSON is pretty secure with some exceptions. Anyway, so let me just demonstrate how JSON works. You probably know, but again, some more novice people might be watching this stream as well. So let's create a data structure which is, for example, an array, and then we have a dictionary. So this is a little more complex of an example of a structure than the one I created in C, because, well, this is a linked list, for example, right, the array, and then we have a dictionary, well, a map, basically, which is a pretty complex structure, actually, in comparison to simple plain old data structures. So to write it down to a file in a serialized way in Python, you can use, I think, at least 3 standard libraries which Python comes with. I'm going to start with the most simple, most basic one. And you do dumps, which means dump to a string, you give it a structure, and you get a string. And this is what would be written down to a file. And, well, JSON is basically, JavaScript object notation. The format was derived from JavaScript. It's not JavaScript formally, I think, but it was derived from JavaScript object notation. So it's pretty readable. And actually, I could just copy paste it to Python and get the same structure, right? It looks almost identical. So, what types of data can JSON serialize? JSON can, in Python, JSON can serialize this thing, and this thing is actually, it looks like an integer, but the JSON standard talks only about the number format, which is actually a floating point format. So the question would be here, what happens if I do, like, if I change the structure and put something rather large here? Let's see how JSON, what kind of JSON do we get from this? Yeah, we get it okay. Though that being said, if we would read this value in like JavaScript, this won't work, right? Because this value cannot be loaded in JavaScript because it's just too large, and we would get like probably here like some strange numbers, because the end would be truncated, because that's how floating points work. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, that would be one, like numbers. Then we can obviously store strings. You can see that we can store strings, so that would be numbers, strings. Then we can store not floats. I already mentioned floats. We can store Boolean variables, so false and true. We can store null, I think that was, which is supposed to represent something which doesn't exist, like none in Python or null in JavaScript, obviously, or null in C. And then we have an array and an object, where an array is basically Python's list and an object is Python's dictionary. And that's so object, I think it's officially called object, but that's actually a dictionary, and treat it like a dictionary. Don't treat it like a real class-based object. So it's pretty simple, right? Now, there's one thing which differs from the structure which I showed you previously, and actually is pretty specific to JSON, is that if I would, let me rephrase it. It's it doesn't have a defined structure. As in, you know, there is the syntax, right? But if I can like easily pass to a JSON endpoint something like this, which is let's say it's correct, and or I can just change it to this, and well, it's in Python it would be none, right? But it would get changed to null in JSON. And while deserializing, the endpoint would basically just create the structure, or well, the structure actually. It wouldn't complain because it doesn't know what types do the endpoint expect. It just knows it expects JSON, and in JSON, then whoever controls JSON can control the structure of it, like can add linked lists, booleans, and whatever in the place they choose. Given this, it's sometimes funny, but usually there are no bugs around it. But this is like, I would say, a problem with JSON. But if you and this is only important if the JSON crosses security boundaries. So like the attacker can actually manipulate the JSON and and send it to the endpoint, because it might, given that the endpoint doesn't check the types, it might end up in some weird situations where, for example, an attacker is able to pass another parameter which does something, or the attacker is able to change the type, which makes the program misbehave. Given that there's something called, I think it's called JSON schema, which basically allows you to define the structure of a packet you're expecting. So for example, we could say that we are expecting a list where the three first elements are numbers, these are numbers, and the next one is a dictionary where the only key allowed is A, and the type of that, the value associated with that key is supposed to be a string, and that's what we would put in a schema file, and then the endpoint would be able to verify the JSON which is incoming against the types, and at least we would get the types right. That's a win already. Okay. Now, what I've shown you up to this point basically still revolves around plain old data, around types which are simple, like numbers, and even dictionaries are pretty simple containers in this context. What about classes and what about objects, right, of the classes? How do we serialize a class? Because if you take a look at classes, it's a little more complicated, because first of all, a class can have its own state, but given that the state isn't really, doesn't have to be fully limited to whatever is in the class, the state doesn't have to be plain old data. It can also be some file handlers or whatever. Even if we get the snapshot of that internal fields of the class, well, that might not really work. So usually to serialize a class, you have to teach the class how to, basically the class has to have a method which returns the serialized data or the data to be serialized. Now, when loading the class might want to take a look at that data again and basically say that, well, for example, the class needs a file handler, but when we serialize the data, we didn't serialize the file handler because the file handle, because the file handle might be like, I don't know, a number 2, which is, or 21. That makes more sense, which is related to the context of a running application. But if we serialize to disk and load it again, then 21 might be a closed file descriptor, which isn't associated with any open file, or it might be another open file. So if we would be to serialize a class which has which operates on a file, we probably would put the file name in the serialized data. Therefore, when loading and serializing the object of that class, we would actually need to open the file again. So this already gives us a need in some cases to be able to wake up a class. Therefore, the class should have some method which is run after it has been, the internal state has been filled, or a method which is called with the deserialization parameters, and then that method is responsible for creating an object of that class, which actually is supposed to make sure that the class is woken up correctly. Apart from that, there are some funny things about classes, and this is what I'm saying now is pretty like general, not really related only to Python. Is that let's go back to the JSON and the example. I said that if you by the way, in JSON there is by default no way to serialize objects and classes. JSON operates only on plain old data, and the objects in JSON are actually just dictionaries, right? So assuming that we have a serialization method which is let's say based on JSON, and we allow, well, we send the packet to an attacker, to a user, but the user might be an attacker, right? Then the user can just manipulate the data and can, for example, change this number into an object of a given class. And the sheer fact that the attacker is able to tell the deserialization engine, hey, please create an object of this class, is already pretty meaningful, because first of all, if there is a wake up method to be called on that class, it will be called. So basically that means that the attacker is able to call a wake up method of a chosen class, because in the serialization stream there would have to be the type of that class, the name of that class, so the attacker just chooses, oh, call this this class with like this class's wake up method with these parameters, where the parameters are basically the state of the class. Furthermore, in some languages, if there are destructors, that means that as soon as the object goes out of scope, or maybe at the end of a program, or maybe when the garbage collector is run, the destructor is going to be called. So the attacker is basically able to determine, well, to provoke the program to call a destructor on a given object, right? An object which the attacker probably controls to some extent, because the attacker was able to, well, put the description of that object in the serialization stream. I guess it will get a little more clear when I reach examples. So it turns out that it's not super common, but if you're an attacker and you are able to control something which is going to be deserialized in some, let's say, web service. It's usually a web service. It doesn't have to be a web service though. And the web service has a large code base which has a lot of classes, and some classes have interesting either wake up methods or destructors or constructors in some cases, because in some cases the wake up method is just a call to the constructor with some parameters. Then you start to be able to execute quite a lot of code. And sometimes that code does really stupid things, like, for example, allows you to execute a process or write data to a file. And that might seem a little far-fetched, but actually it isn't. Surprisingly, it isn't. You can find really surprising stuff in the existing code. So I guess from one perspective, some deserialization attacks basically are similar to return-oriented programming if you're into low-level exploitation, right? You basically look for pieces of code, which in these cases are in the wake-up methods, in the destructors, sometimes in the constructors, depending on the language and the technology you use, and invoke them with semi-controlled parameters to do your bidding. Yeah, so that's basically it. And now I guess we can go down to examples. And again, JSON is not going to be an example because JSON doesn't allow you to do that by itself. There are some extensions in some technologies to JSON which basically describe methods how can you store objects, class objects in JSON. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to give you a link about it later on, which I guess I got from Foxtrot Charlie. Sorry. So the first serialization library which has a problem, which I would like to describe, is Python pickle. But before we get to pickle, I will show you just for a second another Python serialization library which is called marshal. And marshal is interesting to know about. You shouldn't really use it, but it's interesting to know about because of one reason, and that reason is that Python actually uses it internally. So if we let me see if I have anything interesting here. No, I don't. Perfect. Here we go. If we create a like ASDF, no, maybe yyy.py file and compile it, so let's put ASDF here. Sorry, and now let's compile it. Compile all, okay. And it's compiled. We have this pick file. Python compiled, right? This, apart, like starting around here at the 8 byte, I think that's around 8 byte. This is actually just something which has been serialized using the Python marshal library. So we can basically unmarshal it, and if you're into Python reverse engineering, this is one of the things you do. And I'm pretty sure I showed it already on OnStreams, but let's just do it again because it's really fast. So I'm going to import marshal, then I'm going to read that file. So the file was called yyy.pick, read binary. I'm going to read the data from this file. And at the beginning, there is, I think, like 8 or 12 bytes, depending on the Python version, which contain the timestamp and some magic value. So I'm going to ignore it. I think it's around 8. So starting from the 8th data, I'm going to do marshal.load from a string, and then the data. And what it loaded actually a code object. So marshal, the library doesn't really allow you to marshal, like serialize any class type, but it does. It can do code objects, and I think it can do function objects, but do not quote me on that. So yeah, if we are looking basically to what the file is doing, what's going on here, we can look at some fields inside the code object, which isn't really the topic of today's stream, but yeah, let's just go here. So import this C. This is this field basically contains this bytecode. This is actually in another field. So it loads a const, it prints an item, prints a new line, and then basically returns. So yeah, we know what the compiled module is doing now. So yeah, again, marshal is pretty useful, especially if this starts failing you and you want to actually go a little deeper into the topic. You can also serialize with marshal, but it doesn't support all the different bells and whistles of Python. That being said, JSON also doesn't support it. So just like one example, if I would like to if I like serialize a list, then there's no problem. If I serialize a dictionary, then there's also no problem. But if I would like to serialize a set, then it says, yeah, like set is not really JSON serializable. So not all basic types in Python are serializable by JSON, but I think marshal would actually be able to handle every basic type in Python. Yeah, basic. This is the keyword here. Cool. So now let's talk about pickle. Pickle is funny because pickle actually allows you to wake up an object, and not by calling a special wake up function, but by calling the object's constructor. And this is pretty funny if you start thinking about it, because it basically starts boiling down to calling a function of your choice almost with the parameters of your choice, which starts to be a little weird. And I guess I'm going to use the slides which I had for one of my presentations, so please give me a second while I find them. Okay, a browser would be really nice to have. Let's see if I can find them. It would be on Pwning 2016 Gunveil. There are some questions, so let's quickly go through questions. For example, if you have a file header and you do memcopy from the file to struct file, I guess this will become a problem when aligning specific variables. Would you do this effectively in C? So that's a good question. It relates to my C example. So let me just double check if I have a C file open. No, I don't. Oh, this is a new feature of of Windows 1803, which is basically that Win tab sometimes freezes. Perfect. Anyway, so if you're loading it and the alignment is, you know that the file doesn't have any alignment, there is one trick what you can do is you can do pragma pack and like push 1, and that means always align all the fields to 1 byte regardless of what the fields actually want, and at the end of the definition of the structure you can do pack pop, which means basically go back to the previous state which was. And yeah, that's usually the fast way to do it. That being said, the better way to do it is to read every field individually and try to verify them as best as you can while reading. At least that's my take. And also make sure that you actually read everything. As in, you know, you didn't hit the end of a file, because that also might be problematic. Okay, sorry, where are my slides? Okay. Okay, here, blah, 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 where are the slides? Here we go, perfect. Yeah, I had a presentation, Python Hackers Toolbox, but it was the second version of that presentation, but it was in Polish. And there is an older version of this presentation in English, and I think also Disconnected did a like V2 version of this presentation. Anyway, yeah, the thing we are looking for is actually, it's a fun presentation. Like most of the topic of the content you can find on well, I guess on my YouTube channel there's a recording from PyCon, or on like, it wasn't PyCon PL, I guess I can give you a link. PyCon PL Genvale. Yeah, here we go. This is, I guess, has the core of the presentation. So here you go. You do not have to watch it now, I guess. Yes, I love creating a lot of slides. Yeah, pickle, perfect. So, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. This is exactly what I wanted, and this isn't even mine. This is from this person's blog. They have a really, really nice exploit for pickle. So this is how to create the exploit, and yeah, and I really like it. I had my own, but it wasn't as good as this one. Anyway, basically what you do here, reduce. So reduce in Python is like serialize me method. So basically it's being called by pickle when serializing something you give it, for example, an object of this class, right? And yeah, and what you have to return is you have to return basically two things, which is which method to call to wake up an object of your class. Or I think which, no, sorry, this isn't the method, this is which class to call, right? And then the constructor of that class will be called with the arguments which you specify. And you can already see what's going on here, right? So what's going on here is that we specify subprocess.popen class, and that is a class which, well, calls popen, which is process open, and that executes anything. And in this case, we give it some arguments. The first argument is going to be a set, which contains just bin sh, because this is what we want to execute. Then some popen specific stuff, and then we give it the redirections which are supposed to be done to the standard input, output, and error. And in my presentation, I was actually exploiting a web service, right? Where the file descriptor was, well, you have to fix it basically. Verse 20 here isn't correct, but the way you done it, you enumerated like all the file descriptors from the beginning, like 0 is standard input, 1 is standard output, 2 is standard output errors, then there is a listening socket on port 80, and there might be some more listening stuff, or not, and then there will be a client connection, so let's assume that the fourth FD is actually your client connection. And if you redirect bash to your client's connection socket, you basically get a shell on the HTTP connection, which is a quite decent idea. So let's try to basically reproduce it. I'm going to, I guess, copy paste this because again, this is way better than what I did, if I remember, and what I was always doing with pickles. So it's just I really like it. Like the person did a really good job on it. I'm going to give you a link to the blog. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. Now let's try to reproduce it. I'm going to open an editor. I do not have. Oh, perfect. I seriously don't know what did they do with WinTab on the new Windows. I'm pretty sure it behaves differently, as in they probably added some features, but it isn't helping. So I need to take a look later on. Let's create a file, test.py. Okay. And let's import pickle. And let's just copy paste this because, again, it's really nice. Here we go. I don't need this. I need to fix the alignment here. Okay. Yeah, and then we can just take a look on what pickle prints. Pickle is actually a text protocol. So sorry. No, Python test. Yeah, subprocess is not defined because I forgot to do this. Okay, here we go. So yeah, this is what pickle looks like, and basically what it we can, I guess, open the Python source code because pickle is actually, I think, implemented fully in Python. So where's my Python? Let's look there and let's analyze what's actually going on here. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is the pickle implementation. There's a Python version and a C version, like CPickle. I think it's faster. Apart from that, I think there are no differences. So we start with a C. So let's look for C, and C I think is not here because here C is. It's an equivalent of push, self, find class, and whatever the class name is. It takes two strings as an argument, as in module, and then the name of a class. So this is going to be the module, the first argument, and popen is going to be the second argument. So it basically looks for, like, imports this module and looks for the class popen. And then on the stack of the Python, of a pickle interpreter, we have a reference to this class, right? Then we have P0. What's P? P is put. So pickle, yeah, I guess it's a stack machine. You can think of it as a stack machine. It's stored stacked up in memo. I guess memo is like a register, so I guess it's going to take whatever this is returned. This returns, right? The reference to the class, and store it in like 0 memo or 0 register, if you will. And then we have this, like an opening bracket. An opening bracket. Where is an opening bracket? Here we go. Mark. It's like push special mark object on the stack. Okay. And then we have another, so I guess this is another like 2 mark objects, and then there's a capital S. A capital S, you can guess, is a string, so yeah. It pushes a string on the stack until it's null-line terminated. That's pretty uncommon, right, to see a string which is null-line terminated. But it does put this on the stack, and then it grabs whatever's on the stack, which is this, and puts it in memo in register 1. Then there's a T. What's a T? A T is a tuple. So a tuple is created, and the tuple is put on the stack as well, and then there is I0. An int with the value 0 is pushed, I guess. Then we do an I, which is none, and some more ints, 20, 20, 20. This is the file descriptor, obviously, which was configured, or which I forgot to configure. Then we put another tuple on the stack, and or I guess like everything which is on the stack is made into a tuple. That's probably the correct interpretation of it. So we had this on the stack, and then we make a tuple out of it. And then we had these integers on the stack, and then we make a tuple out of that. I wonder how does it know that it should only take these and not the none. Or maybe it takes everything? No, it takes everything. Okay, so that's fine. That's fair. And in the end we do R. R is probably like reduce or something. Let's see. Yes, reduce. It does apply callable to arc tuple both on the stack. So I guess at this point we also have on the stack this, and basically it calls this class, which is again calling the constructor of this class, with these arguments which have been recreated here, and it puts it somewhere, but we don't care where it puts it, right? Because at this moment we have code execution. I guess we can well, take it for a spin. Let's see if it really executes something. And I guess I need to run it under Linux, right? So let's run Linux. Yeah, here we go. Do I have... Yeah, I have disk access. That's something. At least something works after the update. Cool. So we... well, I need to fix this. How am I going to run it? I guess I'm going to run it just from... No, let's do it through the network, because why not, right? So I guess it's going to be the fourth one, and I'm going to store it into a file. So I'm not going to print it, I'm going to put it somewhere. Well, F is a terrible name, because it's usually associated with a file. So evil pickle, and write binary. I don't have to write binary, it's not a binary format, but okay. There might be some binary data in it anyway. Not in my case, but... So okay, we write it, we run it, Python test py, and now we open it in, let's call it target.py, and we do have to code it. So let's assume I'm going to get it from the network. No, seriously, what's with this Win tab in Windows? I'm pretty annoyed by the behavior, I must say. My apologies. I am going to figure out after the stream what's the problem with that. Okay, what did I want? I wanted my browser back. Where's my browser? I'm afraid to click Win tab now. Python socket, this is the way I create Python listening sockets. I go here and then I copy paste this echo code. And I'm pretty sure this is not the way you usually implement it, but it's the way it works fastest for me on CTFs. Yeah, let's just, yeah, like 0000 is fine. This is a local network anyway. This is a perfect port. So I open, I listen to the connector, I connect, I get the data, at most this amount of data, and then if not data, I break. Otherwise I'm going to unpickle it. Loads from a string data and print d, because why not? But at this moment it won't matter because I will be already in another process, I guess. Cool. So this is a listening server. Let's run it. Python target. Okay, it's running. And now let's basically run our exploit. But I am going to use, I guess, Python for it. Sorry, not Python. Yeah, it's like this. So cat evil pickle dash and cut it to netcat dash v and it's CP. Okay, success. And yeah, something was broken. But it did. Why did it break? Maybe I had the incorrect. Oh, because yeah, I probably. Sorry, I need to disconnect. I'm going to double check if I'm on the right file descriptor. So ps-aux grep target, and this is this. Proc this everything. Okay, so it has these many sockets open, and now if I would connect to it with, I guess, another one, so let's connect here, -v, 1, and no, this is not recipe. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm connected, and am I connected? No, I'm not connected. Why am I not connected? Oh, because I messed up the IP. My apologies. Here we go. Okay, no, so it is actually on 4th file descriptor, so why didn't it work for me? Let's rerun it. Maybe it's a netcat thing. Maybe it doesn't transfer all the pickle or something. Oh, I know. Let's do it one more time. I'm actually going to. Yeah, I'm actually going to press enter now because there is the dot at the end. But it's somehow doesn't like it. Okay, you know what? I'm going to grab my. Oh, I think I know what might be the problem. The problem might be actually that these are different Python versions, and I'm pretty sure one of them is really old. So they might disagree in how the pickle protocol looks like. So I'm actually going to grab my CTF framework. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and I'm going to copy paste this. So we are connected. Now put our code here. I put it here, and I do yes send all D, and then we switch into telnet protocol. Perfect. Did I mess up? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't really need this. Any day now. Any day now, seriously. It doesn't like me for some reason. I'm pretty sure I'm sending it the correct payload, but it seems to actually, as we can see, right? It gets to the. No, this is not the target. Where's the target? Here we go. No, not the target. Oh, perfect. Dear Windows, what are you doing again with my desktop? Okay, now it works. Sorry, I clicked on a window and another window was selected, so that was pretty confusing. Cool. So it loads the pickle and it prints the object, and this is where the object is printed, right? So maybe I'm just not running bash for some reason. Or maybe I have no, I know that I have this for correct, so I print the date, does this, and I'm not actually going to do anything here, just to get, I just want to get, like, to see that the command is actually running, and then I'm going to leave it. So let's retry it. Already in use because I didn't disconnect. Now I disconnected. Perfect. And yeah, it doesn't seem to run the data, but let's do one more thing. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strace dash e trace equals process. That shouldn't be in use because I disconnected here as well. That's what you get if you don't bend your socks as your sockets with reusable parameter. So, okay, let's see if there's a question. Isn't Deserialization a place for buffer overflows in some language? It might be, depending on the protocol, but yeah, it might be. But yeah, usually they're well tested, at least. At least, I mean, I looked at some, for example, JSON implementations for C and C++, and buffer overflow wasn't something I found. I did found a bug in a compiler by accident, but that was related basically only to Visual Studio, and I think it was fixed a long time ago. Oh, yeah, I have this habit of clicking Win tab because that usually works marvelously, but I guess not in this case. Okay, here we go. Let's retry it. Yeah, it doesn't seem to actually create the new process. Going to the add -f just to be sure. No, it does execute bin.sh, and then it executes bin.sh again. Oh, right, because I probably made the changes in the wrong file. Sorry, let's move to... maybe you should call .communicate method on... No, that's not it. Because I'm actually redirecting the file descriptors. I just did it in the incorrect file. If I wouldn't redirect the file descriptors, then yeah, then calling the communicate method actually gives me the data, but that's I think that's not the problem in this case. And yeah, I still don't have this socket bound as reusable, so we have to wait 60 seconds again. Okay, there is a link to... Oh, perfect. Disconnected gave a link to his slides from his talk, from the Python 2.0 talk, so I can share it with you as well, but it was a pretty fun talk. Well, I didn't see the talk, I saw the... Or maybe I did, I don't remember. I did see the slides, was pretty sure. So I think you already got it on one channel, but just in case, here we go as well. Oh, no, Foxtrot actually gave me disconnected slides. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, testing it again, and it again runs sh. Oh no, we are in bash. We can see here that we are in bash, right? So bash got executed, and I don't really know why it doesn't work remotely, but it's probably something we wouldn't care anyway about, but just like figure out what parameters to pass here so that a reverse shell would be executed, for example, and we could connect from another port. So yeah, it works, as you can see. So yeah, that was pickle. Pickle is actually, like, even if you go to Python documentation, right, you can see that pickle is something which is not recommended to be run. And on untrusted data. Like, it's a fine serializing library for Python stuff, but do not run it on untrusted data ever, because as you saw, it's pretty trivial to get code execution on if you can pass in a pickle serialized data into something which unserializes it. And I would actually encourage you to look into the pickle file, like libpickle in the Python directory, because as you can see, it's quite easy to understand how it works, and maybe you will find something interesting there as well. Oh, I guess it is a binary file after all, especially in the second version of protocol. So yeah, it might be worth looking at, especially like what is this? Huh, that's interesting. But now let's move on to PHP, because in PHP the situation is a little different. So we also have deserialization bugs, but they work in a little different way. And I guess to show you them, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you this file. Okay, so basically in Python, I believe the classes do not have destructors. I might be mistaken, but in PHP they do. So you have a constructor method, like same like in C++ apart from the name, and you have a destructor method which apart from the name works the same way like in C++. So as soon as the class goes out of scope, then it's basically, sorry, the object of a class goes out of scope is basically calls this method. Now I've also added this here. This is, or you can see this here. In older PHP versions, the constructor was actually had the name of the class, and it was the same as in C++ basically then. And there were no destructors, or like a destructor had this anyway, this name anyway. But from PHP 7, this was actually deprecated. It still works. If no constructor is present, then this would still be called. But yeah, like it's encouraged to use actually the constructor thingy. So this little test code, basically we create new test objects, and as you can see, as soon as we like enter the next line, this assignment happens. That means that this object is already passed to the garbage collector to be destructed, right? So this is going to be called. So looking at the code, we know that the constructor will be called, then the destructor, and then in test 2, this thing will be called. So let's see if that's actually what happens. The order here might be a little different because, in all honesty, I do not know PHP's garbage collector, how does it exactly work. But it makes sense for it to work the way I just described. Okay, and PHP. Yeah. Oh, it's actually, oh right, the other way around, like this is called first because here we create it and the assignments happens later, so the destructor will be called later, but as you can see, this is what happens. Now, in PHP, if you go after deserialization, what you are mostly looking for, but not only, but mostly, are the destructors, because, well, if you create any object, you know that sooner or later the destructor is going to be called. And to make matters a little more interesting, I'm actually going to remove both this and this because this was just an example, I guess. Przemek writes that isn't init a constructor method in Python? Yes, it is, but you don't call it explicitly in Python. You just use the name of a class and then init is called. Yeah, but again, this is PHP. So if we create some fields here, like public, how do you create fields in PHP? Not that I don't remember, but yeah, I'm getting it okay. So let's call one ASDF and let's call another XYZ, and let's just echo them in the destructor. So this ASDF. And then I'm going to add a new line because I'm running this from the command line, and XYZ here. So, okay, perfect. So now if we actually set something there in these fields and then serialize it, and PHP has its own serialization method. So, well, Python had two, right? It had pickle and it had marshal. PHP has one. Okay, and it's also a text-based format if I'm not mistaken, so we just call serialize on whatever I'm going to call it on this object, and run it, and this is what we get. So this is up until here. Like, don't look at this. This is because I forgot to add a new line and the constructor was called. Sorry, destructor was called. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I guess it's pretty readable, right? But let's go through it anyway. This means create an object, and this isn't a stack machine. This is closer to JSON with types, basically. This is how you might think of it. So it's like different than pickle. It's more similar to JSON. It means that there's an object, create an object, and I think this for relates to how many letters does the string with the name of the class have. And it has 4 letters, so this is test. And then it has 2 fields inside, because from here, right, there is basically a dictionary of fields inside the object and their values. And the first field is a string. This is the lowercase s, and the string is 4 letters, 4 bytes, 4 characters, and that's ASDF. And then there's the and this is basically a pair. It starts here and it goes up until here. Like, the first string is the name of a field. The name of a field is ASDF, and then is the type of a field, which is string, the length of data, and the data itself. This is the value inside the field. And then after this pair is read, we have the second field. The name of the field is XYZ, and XYZ is as well the value inside that field. And we end reading here. And this is basically how a serialized class looks like. So if we would be an attacker who gets their hands on this and is able to send it to an endpoint which does unserialization, which does deserialization, right? What can we do here already? Well, we know we can basically create any object of a given class which we choose, and then we can set internal fields, whatever internal fields. It doesn't matter if the field exists in the code. So even if we wouldn't have like XYZ here, we still could say that this class should have actually an XYZ field, and the field should be something like this, and that's fine. This isn't actually checked. So this is why it's actually a little more, well, why this is dangerous, I guess, that we can basically call a destructor of any class we choose as an attacker with all the parameters of the class set to the ones we like. Now, I don't think in PHP by default there are too many interesting classes. So in the end, this boils down to what classes are in the code base we are exploiting. Like, think about WordPress or PHPBB or MediaWiki or whatever else there is. These are like huge code bases, and they have a lot of classes and probably a lot of destructors. So we'll take a look on that. But apart from that, PHP also has a magic method which is called wakeup. And wakeup is called anytime a class is deserialized. So let's keep this here, but let's actually put it in some variable. So here we go. And now let's do serialize. So I'm going to call it O for an object, and that's actually the method is called unserialize. Sorry, I'm going to check this. Okay. Perfect. So basically now we got this, we can do a var dump on the object, and we will know that the object was loaded, which we can confirm here. This is basically where the destructors are being called. So this is the var dump of the object of the class test, and these are the fields inside this class. So this is basically what was deserialized, right? Now let's add the wakeup function, public function. Yeah, sounds good. Wakeup. Wakeup doesn't take any parameters, and it's called after all the internal parameters of the class, all the fields of the object actually are set, which means that like this is already set in the wakeup. Okay, and let's confirm it, so that it's actually called. And as you can see, before the deserialization's exit, the wake up method was called. And you're supposed to use the wake up method again to like open closed file descriptors or reconnect to a database or do similar stuff like that. And I did see that in sometimes the programmers do sanitization checks for unserializing here, which I guess makes some sense as well. So they do, for example, like like set ASDF to an empty string or something. Yeah, so this is how it works. So this is basically the basis of it. Now the question is, what can we do? And again, this boils down strictly to what is in the code base. So I guess we can take a look at some code bases, and I do have WordPress, PHP, BB, and MediaWiki, which I did tell you about before here, and I'm going to grab them. I guess I'm going to grab them. Oh, this is already from MediaWiki, but yeah, let's just grab them and look for at the struct and so on. So no, I actually think Total Commander will be a little better for this. So let's start with WordPress, and I'm going to look. So yeah, here I'm going to look for the struct, whole words only and case sensitive. And as you can see, it did found some destructors, right? So we can go one by one through them, but it depends, I guess. It also depends if the class has been already declared in the context you're exploiting, or if there is a way to load the class. And for example, if the class is like, is there any possibility to auto-load the class, right? Because PHP gives you such possibilities. But let's go through them one by one and see what we have here. This is just calling the destructor, so I guess this isn't what we're really interested in. I guess what we should actually look for is the struct with a bracket. So no, the struct with a bracket doesn't work either. So with a space at the beginning and a bracket, and that doesn't work either because there might be something else. Yeah, let's just go through this. I'm going to, I'm going to continue like that. Here, yeah, well, this destructor doesn't really give us anything. If we could create an object of this class and then it gets destroyed, right, gives us nothing. Here, this is a call, and no. Okay, this is again a call. How about this one? This is a function which, here is the destructor, but again, just returns true. This doesn't do any interesting code. What about here? No, just calling here then. Oh, probably due to the whole words only. It doesn't like the space, so yeah, let's do that. That would be way faster. Perfect. Here, it already is a little more interesting. As you can see, it checks if the field which we control as an attacker, image, is set, and if it is set, then it calls image destroy. Well, this isn't terribly useful, I would say, because I'm not sure if we could actually provide some interesting image to image destroy to like execute our code, right? Unless there is a bug and image destroy, of course. But yeah, it doesn't look too interesting, so let's move on. Here, this is pretty similar, with the exception that it actually calls this image, and then it's an object, right? And then it calls methods. But as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there is no way to provide your own methods using deserialization. So you cannot serialize methods and unserialize methods. You can do that only to fields. Therefore, this doesn't really give us too much, unless we could create and we could find another class somewhere in in the context which has method clear and destroy, which would give something to us, and then we could actually create an instance of that class, create an object of that class, and put it in the image field of this class, and then these methods would be called. But again, it boils down to what these clear and destroy methods would be doing. So we could now go and look. Perhaps there is like some directory class somewhere which we could initialize to point to some directory, and the clear would actually remove all the content of the directory, because it might exist, right? So we would have to go and look for all the functions, public functions. Well, I don't think they have to be public, which do clear, but I'm not going to do it now, but just out of curiosity, I am going to note it down, so perhaps we can get back to this later. Okay, let's look again, and now this is something in the admin content, so this probably isn't going to be too interesting, or maybe not even reachable, right, from a normal attacker's perspective. FTP close on something which we control. Again, we would have to have a bug probably in FTP close for this to be interesting. There's probably a check at the beginning of FTP closes. This is even a resource, but yeah. And here we have like a similar function. If we could find a an object of a class which has a method named quit and does something interesting, then we could call it with, again, all the parameters of the class of our choice, but not the function call parameters, obviously. SMTP close, yeah, we cannot override methods, so this gives us nothing, and this is the only destructor here. Next. And again, now we can probably see why is it similar to return-oriented programming, right? Because I'm basically browsing through gadgets, and I'm seeing what kind of gadgets do I have, and how can I create a chain of these gadgets, or like grab maybe one gadget, which would yield something interesting for me. Okay, it checks if something is a resource. I don't think we can serialize resource. I'm not sure, but but I would say, yeah, maybe no. Sorry, are there any other destructors here? No other destructors, and this include. It checks the version, or if something. I'm not sure if any of these would be met, but in such cases, it calls the destructor, which is, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that this wouldn't pass because I'm running now PHP 7 or garbage collector not enabled, so. And I have garbage collector enabled, so I'm pretty sure we couldn't get to this if in the first place. If we could, then we could call some destructors, but I mean, we can call destructors anyway. This doesn't give us anything. And this is another. Yeah, this is pretty much similar, like just unset is called, which isn't terribly useful either. So now let's see if we can find any method which is called, so public function clear. Oh, it doesn't have to be public, by the way. It just has to be named clear. Let's do this. No. Maybe destroy. There's one. What does it do? Okay, so we do not control this, and we do not control this. This function would be called without any parameters in our case, so I think that PHP would complain, or this would be probably unset. Yeah, it doesn't seem to give us anything, I would say. Like on the first check, and let's see also quit. There are quit in two places. So this one, and it sends a command, and this will probably fail already. And it will probably save the error as well, so yeah, this doesn't look super interesting unless the send command, is something, unless it's something terribly interesting. And I don't think it is, actually. Oh, yeah, we will, I guess, fail here already. Maybe we can do something and we will not fail. Yeah, it's something I would actually normally go deeper if I would be exploiting this. I would analyze this code, because why not? But now I'm going to just skip it. Here I'm looking for quit function. Quit. Okay. So if FP is not set, but we can set it to anything. Otherwise, it writes to FP. Yes, well, if we could somehow fake a resource, but we probably cannot fake a resource, so this would probably not work. If we could fake a resource, then we still don't get anything terribly interesting here, I guess. But yeah, it was worth checking. So the other thing to check for is the wake up function. But it's not used in WordPress anyway. So I'm going to, I guess, go through PHP BB now. It should take, several more minutes. Let's look at wake up. No wake up again. Let's look for destructors. And there are only two, and one is in PHAR file. So let's look in the PHAR file. It's a PHP archive, but this archive looks weird, and it doesn't look like a zip file. Okay, I guess we have this destructor. What does it do? So I'm not sure if this is like... Yeah, I'm not sure this is terribly interesting. We maybe could set errors, but I'm not super sure about it. Oh, this remove files is interesting. Maybe we can remove any files. This calls a stop, which we would again have to look through the stop methods to see what do I do. But I'm actually going to move to MediaWiki, and I'm going to look for destructor again. And as you can see in MediaWiki, there's way more stuff. And let's look at the first one. And the first one is already pretty interesting, and we can copy it to our code and see how it works. Because as you can see in the destructor, it calls call user function. Call user function is a little misnomer because it's actually call function. It's just, yeah. And it calls this function, which we actually control because this is a field in the class. And then it calls, it calls it with this parameter, which is like some text string. So this is a gadget which we could use, and we could use rather trivially. So I'm going to go copy paste it to our code, and let's see if we can run any code from this. So I'm going to replace the destructor of, let's maybe copy paste the class here. Okay. I'm going to then comment out this code. Okay. And let's create the struct tracer node. Perfect. Now let's serialize it. Serialize, and now let's just print whatever we serialized and see how it looks like. Too few arguments to constructor. B, because at this point we don't care too much. There's a PHP warning. Okay, but that's fine. That's fine. We don't care about the warning. However, I am going to add a new line here. So this is the serialized object, right? I'm going to copy paste it to the editor because we are going to work on it. So, yeah, that's not it anymore. This is what we're working on. Okay. And now we can put any function name here. What are we going to put here? We obviously are going to put here system. And system is actually 6 characters. So, yeah, so that's 6. And, okay, whatever. And then, oh, now I see what's going on here. That's funny. As you can see, this is a private field, and what that means is actually like the name of a class concatenated with the name of a field. Now that's hilarious. I wonder if that's really how PHP internally deals with private fields, then what? But okay. And whatever argument I give here, right, will be passed here. So we probably need something like, yeah, like a semicolon and then whatever code we want to execute. Let's say we want to execute date and then another semicolon, because why not? So semicolon, date, semicolon, and this is 6 characters. And now let's unserialize it. So object is supposed to equal to, oh, we don't need this anymore, by the way, because we have already serialized it. So unserialize, serialize, and the string. And I'm not going to do anything more. Let's see if this does the job. So unexpected, oh, where do we where are we not expecting? Oh, sorry. Syntax error line 20. Oh, because, yeah, I forgot the semicolon. Unserialize error on offset. This is 6 characters. This is 6 characters. What did I mess up? This is still 28. Oh, that's 26 characters. And this is... Okay. And this it shows me 21. There is some magical character here, which I don't see. Now, this is funny. I guess we need to learn which character is that, or just change this to public, but whatever. Let's learn what character is that. So it's also better than I actually expected. So I'm going to comment this out. And here I'm actually going to do var dump. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Why is it null? Because I... Okay. No. I want to serialize it, but to serialize it, I need to do this. No. Wait. This. Okay. It doesn't show me what character is here. Maybe that's the console's problem. So I'm going to put it through hex dump -c. And yeah, this is the character I'm looking at, and that's a 0. That's a binary 0. So is there any more binary 0 here? Yes. So at the beginning there's a binary 0, and at the end is a binary 0. So that's a little better, because that's not something you can have in the source code. So, okay, I'm sorry PHP for complaining about you. That is actually not bad at all. Which means we do need to put this, and we need to put the, too far here. Oh, but I'm using, oh my. So I do have to do this because it's PHP, and in PHP actually, if you use single quotes, you cannot do escapes, I think. I'm pretty sure you cannot. No, maybe you can do escapes, but you cannot. Let's see. Let's see. Again, here and here. Perfect. Let's run it. And there's still a problem. Maybe because I like when I copy pasted it. No, I'm going to assume that. Sorry, let me do a quick test. X41, okay. This should either display X41 or A, and it displays X41, okay. So I do have to use double quotes. And yeah, and then it displays A. Okay, so I am going to use double quotes here after all. So my memory wasn't failing me in the end after all. Here we go, and here we go. Okay, perfect. Now let's run it. And as you can see, the date was executed. It complains that this wasn't found. This is the beginning of the string, as you remember. And then it executed the date command, which means, again, well, if we would be exploiting MediaWiki for some reason and this class would be present, then we just use this class, set these fields to whatever we like, and this function is going to be called. So this is why in PHP, this is problematic, basically. Okay. I guess this kinda brings us to the end of the stream. There's one more thing, which is the Java deserialization, but in all honesty, I don't know Java deserialization that well. I never exploited it, so it's hard for me to describe it in a decent way to you. But I'm going to give you a link to some some stuff I found basically when exploring the subject. And just let me find the links I prepared for you today. So this is a pretty cool presentation, first of all. Marshalling pickles. This is, I guess, about both Python, PHP, and Java. And it also does explain at some point what's the how does it work in Java with classes and with serializing classes and deserializing them. In Java, it's basically like there is no destructor and there is no way to call the constructor like it's the case in Python. You actually, what you do is you call a wake up function. It's actually not called wake up. I think it's called read something, read object or something like that. And what your ability is basically to invoke that method with somewhat controlled parameters, and it turned out that in some cases it actually can lead to code execution because people put either weird stuff there or there are a lot of classes in case of Java which you can chain together and use. So this is the first one. Then I have a pretty much a rather nice description of some vulnerabilities in Java with deserialization. So this is the second link I'm going to give you. Then OWASP actually has a nice page on deserialization. Well, it's not perfect, but you might read there about it. Then, okay, I guess I gave you the slides, and then Foxtrot Charlie gave me a link to, which doesn't work. Wait, because I actually merged two links together, so here we go. This is from Alvaro about JSON attacks, basically, which means it's basically a player from N3P. It's one of the CTF teams, or one of the best CTF teams. And I think there's a storm outside. Anyway, there's basically it goes through all the frameworks which extended JSON to give you the ability to serialize and deserialize objects, and they show how to attack them, which is pretty awesome actually. Okay, and I think there is one more link. Yeah, the one more link is actually about .NET deserialization by the same person, by Alvaro. It's actually a video presentation, so I pasted them on chat, and I hope we'll paste them on under the description of a video as well. Okay, let's go through questions now, and then we can wrap it up for the day. But next time I'll actually do the if-fail bug, actually, because why not? So, okay, questions. Is deserialization a thing that kernel mode drivers should use, or is it too dangerous? So again, with deserialization is like like this. If you use it correctly and don't do funny things, it's usually fine, and usually it's better than just unpacking the data. If the drivers would use something like Google Protobuf, then it should be fine, ish. But because there are some allocations and some other stuff going on inside there. Yeah, I guess like I would suggest using serialization and deserialization when communicating with drivers, because that at least gives you a method to, like, one read method and one write method, like import data, export data, or like serialize, deserialize, however you want to call it, which is basically your single point of failure when reading data. And yeah, it might be a better idea, but I'm not sure what to propose as a serialization protocol for drivers, because that's a pretty unusual question, and it's normally not used. But Yeah, maybe. I think that's not a bad idea, actually, but probably not JSON and not other stuff. JSON wouldn't be bad here, but JSON's a little slow, but that's a pretty verbose protocol, actually. So, good question, actually. Okay, Melvin says, could you write a tool for automating this, for example, by doing source code analysis and creating a call graph? Yeah, Melvin, you basically could automate the PHP, looking for PHP classes. One thing you could do is you can just modify a little the interpreter, the PHP interpreter, and tell it to output you all the classes with destructors and wake up methods in a given context. And that's actually what I was thinking about doing yesterday, like if I would be exploiting something really huge. Apart from that, if you'd have to look for all the methods of a given name, then yeah, like AST, analyzing AST trees and so on might do the job. Or I'm kind of like on the edge here because it's also, sorry, on the fence here, but it's also a little overkillish because maybe grep is enough. Okay, then I think I have some more questions. For Java, I suggest looking at how do you read it? YSO serial project on GitHub. Yes, there is something like that. I did also see it yesterday, but it's a proof of concept tool for generating payloads for exploits. Okay, perfect. Thank you for suggesting it. Why so serial? Okay, why so serial? Perfect. That's a good name. Okay, so thanks Farisos for that. Then I'm looking for any other questions here. Okay, so I have several more questions which are, I guess, off-topic a little more. I'm wondering, what is your hardware setup for podcasts with multi-monitors and all? Any special GPUs you're using? So, yeah, I need to write that down somewhere. That's not a super common question, but I guess every like 3 streams I'm kind of answering it. So, yeah, I have four LCDs, like 1, 2, 3, 4. That being said, I don't have them especially for live streaming because I always had them. I just like to have a lot of, desktop real estate, basically, to pollute my desktop with Windows, open Windows, quite a lot of them. That being said, it is useful because I can have like live stream chats on one monitor, a full desktop which you can see for doing stuff. Then I have the preview and YouTube on my upper monitor, and I have like some additional workspace for file manager and so on, and questions from you folks on the last monitor. So that's pretty useful. Apart from that, I have a mic which is Blue Yeti Pro. I guess that's the most go-to or standard mic like podcasters have, and that was recommended by a friend, one of my Polish friends actually. But it's good, and it is good. It's way better than the one I had before. I have 2 webcams, which is sometimes useful. I think about getting a third one as well, because for some streams when I have a lot of showing to do of like hardware lying around, I didn't do many streams like that, but I did at least one, and I was missing one more camera basically. I just googled for like what's the best cheap webcam out there, and got a cheap webcam from Logitech basically. Apart from that, I have a pretty normal graphic card. That's 980 Ti GeForce. So it's basically like the high end from last model. And I have a HDMI capture card for for like a PCI Express, which also does the job. It's pretty useful if I would like to show you screen from my like C64 or Atari or whatnot, because I connected to the FrameMeister, which is something which converts basically old computer signal into video signal and audio signal into HDMI, and then I can plug it into the capture card and show it to you. The same with a phone, right? I have like this phone. I can connect it to actually HDMI using because it has USB-C, which actually has HDMI output as well. So yeah, I could connect it to that as well if we would ever to do a stream with Android. Apart from that, I can connect my normal camera as well, or like Nintendo Switch or whatever we would need. So I'm pretty happy with that card actually, and it just works, and it's seen by ops as a camera, as a video source. So I'm really happy with that. Not that I use it frequently, right? And I think that's about it actually. Due to my setup basically requires around 16 gigs of RAMs mostly for storing intro graphic, but as you probably know, I have a little more RAM than that. I think that's about it. I also have like a large HDD to store the recordings just in case that YouTube doesn't archive them, but usually that's not needed. I think it was needed once. Cool. So yeah, and I'm using open broadcast software with quite a lot of scripts in the background right now for random stuff like donations or showing you questions if our backend is actually working, and doing some other stuff. Okay, what is your scheme color number in wallpaper engine? That is an excellent question. Let me check. If it executes itself, I can tell you. Any day now. No, seriously. Okay, here we go. Wow, okay, so according to wallpaper engine, I don't have any wallpaper chosen at all, so I'm kind of afraid to touch anything here. Why does it think I don't have any? That's weird. You know what? I'm going to yeah, that's pretty weird. I'm going to blame it on Windows upgrade, because I'm today blaming everything on Windows upgrade. Yeah, it shows that I don't have wallpaper engine running and set up at all, so I cannot tell you what are the colors. And wallpaper engine is actually a little annoying in that sense that if I connect and disconnect my monitors around, it actually sometimes loses the settings and I have to redo them again. So yeah, when I redo them again, I'll note it down. That's pretty weird though. So sorry, Thomas. Remember about graphic tablet drawing? Yes, so I did try that, but for some reason, and I don't know what yet, I need to debug it, sometimes the pen, and sometimes, I mean every 5 seconds, the pen basically loses signal for 1 second. And that just doesn't work, so that's why I'm drawing with a mouse now. I need to figure out. What do you think about biometric login on home computers, for example, many laptops? I don't like it. I mean, how do you know, the usual argument is how do you rotate your fingerprints if you lose one or it gets published by some accident? How do you rotate it, right? You cannot. Or yeah, I don't like the idea of biometric authentication, actually. I don't think that's a good idea. Though a lot of companies seem to disagree with me. Yeah, there's also, you know, the old problem of rubber hose cryptography. If you can, it's a little easier if you like, if you need to, you can save a password to somebody else instead of like giving them your finger. Sorry for being a little like grim here. They actually added timeline to WinTab, but it doesn't always display timeline. That's pretty weird how it behaves. It like sometimes displays the normal old WinTab behavior, and sometimes it displays the timeline. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. I need to check it. It corrects. Oh, it shows history and web history from Microsoft Edge. So it shows me the download page for Chrome, basically, you mean? Perfect. And it's syncing with the cloud. I'm pretty sure it's not syncing with the cloud in this case, but like in my case. But yeah. That's I understand why they did it, but I do hope that the normal WinTab still works. Okay. Okay. Oh, there's init and there's new in Python for constructors. So new is actually, yeah, I think init is the constructor in Python, but new is actually an operand override. So it's like same like operator override, same like C++. That's my take on it. So that's not fully a constructor, right? That being said, I think Foxtrot Charlie added that new creates an object, init initializes them. Yeah, so new is same like in C++. It's basically to kind of allocate the memory for the object. Though in Python, I guess that means something different. So init would still be the constructor in that case, and del is the destructor. So there is a is del a destructor then, or is it? I guess it's called in the same context as operator delete would be called in C++, but I'm not sure if like that's the typical definition of a destructor, but maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. So thank you for letting me know about both new and del. That's pretty useful. Okay, I got a good link about it anyway, so thank you for the link as well, Dohan, Foxtrot. I'm pasting it to the channels. I guess we can try to add it to the description as well. It's basically about venue and init, which I was just talking about. There's some more discussion there about it. Yeah, let's just go with the link, and there's another link from Dohan about it, so I'm going to give you another link. Here we go. Quite a lot of links today. Is it possible to have Linux installed on a FAT32 partition? How a FAT32 file system looks from a security perspective, ACL and stuff. There are no ACLs on FAT32. FAT32 doesn't support any ACLs. It has like 4 file attribute. That's the hidden, which isn't really hidden. It's just like, you know, for a decorative argument to not show you the file because you don't want to see it, right? But it's not really hidden. Then it's read-only, system, and archive, which I have no idea what archive mean, actually. Maybe some applications use it not to backup or to backup a file. And that's it. So yeah, FAT32 doesn't have any security. I'm pretty sure it's possible to install Linux on it because that's Linux. And I'm pretty sure that's a terrible idea. Unless you like don't really need, you know, don't really need any security, and probably don't need to create some of the types of the files you can create on X4 partitions. I'm not sure, for example, if you would create like a named pipe on a FAT32, how would that look like? Because I'm not sure if anything is written to disk then, or is it just a virtual file in the file system of the kernel and not really written. So I'm not sure about it. Yeah, my guess is you could make Linux work on FAT, but you shouldn't. Yeah, unless you know what you're doing. Obviously, if you not know what you're doing, then I'm not stopping you. Okay, another question. What's the best way to loop a Python code without while loop and ugly impractical indentation? That depends on what kind of loop do you want to make, because usually you use, for something in Python. That's the, I guess, most common way of doing things. I'm not sure about ugly and impractical indentation. I actually do like indentation in Python. I think that forces the programmers to write, the like novice programmers to basically learn to make the indentation correct, because Python forces you to do it. Though I'm not really sure I understand the question, so yeah, sorry. And another, do you plan trying hardware reverse engineering someday? Do you mean on the stream? If you mean on the stream, then hopefully yes. If you mean apart from the stream, yeah, I'm sometimes looking at hardware as well, but I'm only learning right now. I'm like totally basics. That's my level right now. But I hope to do some hardware on stream sometime in the future as well. Cool. So, I think there are like 2 more questions. I think I still have time for that. Is the format string exploitation technique still current topic? Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe not really. So I think you could still find bugs like that, but they are kind of on the dying side, and exploitation is also dying a little there. So if you correctly compiled the program with whatever new compiler and library, you probably have the way of exploiting a format string anyway. For historical reasons, I would learn it, especially that, there is still a lot of legacy software out there, so it still might be needed from time to time. But I don't remember when was the last time I found like a real software bug like that. So yeah, it's a good question. And another one from Walter, the last one, I guess. You mentioned that you prefer to use Python because of hex string and quotes .decode hex. So why not just add the wrapper script to Python startup and use py3? Is there a wrapper script that does it? Like, is there a wrapper script that adds .decode method to Python 3 strings? I'm not sure. The other thing is in Python 3 there is the default string is actually a Unicode string from Python 2, and the string from Python 2 is actually bytes in Python 3. So due to that, it's also a little more annoying to use some stuff. Also, if you open a file in Python 3 with text argument, like a text file, right, not binary, then you actually, if you read, you always get a Unicode string, but if you open it for binary, you always get bytes. So it's like, it's great if you want to create like a proper code, write proper code. And I do use Python 3 when I want to write proper code. But if I want to write fast code for SCTF to solve an ad hoc problem, the code doesn't have to be nice. I want to be able to code it as fast as possible, and then Python 3 just like has some issues which make me not use it for these cases, right? So it basically boils down to use the right Python version for the right job. Cool. So I guess that's it for today. I can show you, I guess, also the there was, the questions at the beginning of the stream. I can show you the results. So let's do that quickly. Just need to quickly catch Foxtrot Charlie to see if I have access to that. Okay. Okay, I do have. So perfect. Here we go. Okay, so this was the short test. Let me know in the comments if you liked it, or let us know now on the chat if you liked it. Okay, perfect. LFH not always starts immediately after previous LFH. That's true. Contains redundant data. Yeah, totally. Doesn't store compression method. It does store compression method. Has a pointer offset to next LFH. No, it doesn't. By the way, these questions were created by Foxtrot Charlie, so I might totally fail them. Sorry about that. If that happens. Okay, zip header CDH, which is central directory header, is located in the first. No, that's not true. It's at the end, near the end of the file. has a minimum size of 22 bytes. I think that's correct. I would have to calculate, but that might be right. Plus minus some bytes for the file name. I'm not sure if Foxtrot actually added the file name here as well. Doesn't contain metadata such as file comment. No, it does. It does contain the file comment. Contains useless end of central directory header bytes. No, that's actually like the last entry in CDA in central directory entries is basically this one. Zip archives can store symlinks, totally. Can store CRC32 before encryption, yes. Can store multiple files with the same name, totally. Can store wrong uncompressed size, yeah, it can. Pick some file extension which are zip archives. This is, I have no idea what this is, so I'll probably fail this question. Maybe it's also a zip file, so I don't know. Zip parsing library matters because using different libraries we can get different content of the archive. Yeah, totally. Doesn't matter. Zip is consistent. Haha, nice joke. Zip have different parsing strategies. That's true, and have only one. No. So that's it. And show result. I got 5 out of 5, which is perfect. Can I look at, yeah. These are all the results you gave. So yeah, I guess a lot of people got this one correct. So well done. Yeah, almost everyone got this one correct. So well done as well. Here, yeah, almost everyone got this one correct. This one was a little tricky. I did mention it on the last stream, by the way. Oh, this one, yeah, looks a little more random, I would say. Yeah, you got mostly it correct, so still well done. And here is like also totally random. This is correct. This, yeah, like should be here, I guess. This is correct, and yeah, this is not correct. So still, well done. If you're interested in zip files, just rewatch the recording of a last live stream, because that was when I discussed it. So that's it. Oh, there's an explanation for the question. I meant that you write a program that has 50 lines of code and you want to run it infinitely unless user decides to exit. Most common way is to use while, but you have to ident 50 lines. No, you put the 50 lines in a function and you have another function where you have the while and you call that function. So usually you also want to have the functions as small as possible so you don't have too many indentations, and therefore you probably won't have too many functions which have 50 lines. That also saves a little on the indentation. Also, actually, indenting 50 lines isn't a problem, right? Because most editors have actually a simple shortcut for that. So yeah, that's it. Okay, I have a mission for you today. Best of luck. Thank you, Foxtrot Charlie, for being the moderator today, and thank you for being here. See you next week. And let me